largest electric utility. NextEra is the parent company of Florida Power and Light, while Dominion's territory includes Virginia, which is home to a large number of data centers. The proposed merger comes at a time when both demand for power and utility investment are surging. Meanwhile, the price that consumers pay for electricity has jumped more than 6% over the last year, outpacing overall inflation. Some of the nation's biggest retailers are set to report earnings later this week. Investors will be watching Walmart, Home Depot, and Target's results for clues about how consumers are spending in the face of high gasoline prices. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
The National Weather Service is warning of potentially severe thunderstorms across the central U.S. today. The highest risk is expected around Kansas and southeast Nebraska. NPR's Tom Dreisbach has more.
The Weather Service says to expect severe thunderstorms, strong winds, as well as large hail and additional tornadoes across parts of the central U.S. They say people should prepare, charge your phone to get wireless emergency alerts, check the radio. And Nebraska-based National Weather Service meteorologist Chris Franks told people to identify the best shelter in case of a tornado.
Just remember, interior room on the lowest level of your house or a basement. Those are the great places to be. So stay away from that top floor. Stay away from exterior walls with windows.
Tom Dreisbach, NPR News.
The Israeli Navy has intercepted a flotilla of boats sailed by activist and humanitarian workers trying to reach Gaza. Duri Buskarin has more.
The Global Sumud Flotilla departed from southern Turkey on Thursday with 54 boats. Organizers say they were in international waters, 250 nautical miles away from Gaza, when the boats were intercepted.
This is Munki. I repeat, we are being intercepted.
Videos posted by sailors on the flotilla show Israeli Navy speedboats approaching. A live stream later showed sailors in orange life jackets with their hands up. Flotilla organizers called Israel's interception an act of piracy meant to maintain Israel's, quote, genocidal siege of Gaza. In a statement, the Israeli Foreign Ministry called the flotilla a provocation and claimed the flotilla was not carrying humanitarian aid. Israel has blockaded Gaza since 2007, including cutting off access to the sea. For NPR News, I'm Duri Buskarin in Istanbul.
You're listening to NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Raymond James, where wealth management, banking, and capital markets strategies start with connections between people. Raymond James, the power of personal. Disclosures at raymondjames.com. This is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Harab. Early voting is underway in the Texas primary election. Congressman Christian Menefee was out early this morning, rallying supporters at Wheeler Baptist Church.
It has been a long, long road. Voters have had to go to the polls now 4 times in the past 7 months. So we're just working hard to spur people's excitement, man, and do all we can to make sure we get good turnout.
Wheeler Baptist Church is where we find News 88.7's Tom Perumian. Tom, I understand Menefee is not the only candidate rallying supporters this morning.
Yes, we've had a few candidates that have come by Wheeler Avenue Church. Melanie Miles, the candidate for the Democratic candidate for Justice of the Peace in Precinct 7-2, is out here, as was former Judge Darrell Jordan. He was out fostering the area. Of course, a lot of supporters for Al Green and Christian Menefee here at Wheeler Church. And a lot of folks are basically trickling in. It's a very calm morning for voters. They're going out and they're coming in, and they're in a pretty steady stream, but just a few at a time. So things are still underway here. We've got a long day of voting in front of us, so we're getting ready for it. Reporting from Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church, I'm Tom Perumian, News 88.7.
All right, Tom. Joe Panzarella is the next city council member for District C, which covers the Heights, Montrose, and Meyerland neighborhoods. The progressive community organizer won a special election against former City Hall staffer Nick Helyar in a landslide on Saturday with about 65% of the vote. He ran on a platform partially about changing city regulations to make home building easier.
This is a grassroots, people-powered campaign that is passionate about safer streets, about affordable housing, and transparency. And we have proven that this is what a lot of folks in District C are looking for.
The swearing-in ceremony is slated for next Wednesday. And an investigation will continue today after a body was found off of Greens Bayou on Saturday evening, just off of I-10. Officers responded late on Saturday and spotted the body along the edge of the bayou near the water. Police say the victim is an adult man. His identity has not been released, nor his cause of death. For more news, you can head to our website. That's HoustonPublicMedia.org. I'm Matt Harab, News 88.7.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Good morning. Thanks for joining us here on News 88.7 and Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. Coming up this hour, what the conditions and policies surrounding sidewalks in Houston have to say about what we value. Also, your dog and cat care questions for veterinarian Dr. Lori Teller. You can send those now to talk@houstonmatters.org. And we will talk about some good news and bad news for the Astros and dig into the Texans' 2026 regular season schedule, which was released late last week. First, though, as you just heard, yes, here comes yet another election. Early voting is underway today in the Texas primary runoffs, with Election Day just 8 days from now on Tuesday, May 26th. That follows another election that was just held Saturday for voters in Houston City Council District C. Let's talk about it all now with Mark Jones, political science fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Mark, good morning.
Morning, Craig.
Let's start with Saturday's news. Joe Panzarella won the Houston City Council District C runoff by a wide margin, 64 to 35% over Nick Hellier. Why do you think Panzarella won so handily?
I think, one, we had another low turnout election. A few more people voted than back in April, but it was like less than 10,000 still, less than 6%. Panzarella was able to appeal to the more activist base who actually still are turning out election after election, and was able to present himself as the more progressive candidate, the more fighter candidate, the person who would be out there advocating for progressive issues on a wide range of topics. And that's what the small electorate, less than 10,000, wanted to hear.
Panzarella's victory comes despite a late attack ad and court challenge targeting Panzarella because he accepted an endorsement from the Council on American Islamic Relations, a Muslim civil rights organization, which the Abbott administration, without evidence, has characterized as a terrorist organization. A court rejected a petition late Friday to extend voting hours to Sunday, ostensibly so Orthodox Jews could vote another day, even though they'd had many days of early voting to do so. Did any of that affect this race, in your view?
Not really. I mean, I think the hope that was probably a Hail Mary was that by filing that lawsuit and putting the spotlight on the issue of the endorsement of Panzarella by CARE, that would motivate some Jewish voters to turn out and vote for Hellier on Saturday. But clearly, if any did, it wasn't nearly enough.
Or perhaps it motivated some to vote for Panzarella.
Quite possibly.
Yeah. For people who weren't following this race closely, what else should they know about Panzarella? You mentioned he's progressive. What else?
Well, I think he's going to fit in very much in terms of that progressive wing of the council, in terms of pushing issues. He's probably going to be more of an opponent of the mayor than an ally of the mayor, although I think we need to wait and see until he's actually on council and actually has the ability to introduce legislation as well as vote on things and speak in chamber to see really where he's going to go vis-a-vis the mayor.
Yeah, he was co-founder of No Higher, No Wider I-10, president of Freedmanstown 4th Ward Super Neighborhood. He's a Bike Houston advocate. It's very different, though, once you're an elected official on city council, different from being there protesting something city council's doing and actually being the one voting on it.
Right. So he has a lot of experience being an activist, but now he's going to actually have to get his hands dirty and work on solving the projects and problems, which sometimes isn't as easy as protesting. That is coming to compromises and making compromises, which is part of governance.
All right. On to the primary runoff election. Early voting is now underway. Election day is Tuesday, May 26th, a week from tomorrow. This is the election that will decide, among other races, whether incumbent John Cornyn or challenger Ken Paxton will be the GOP nominee to face Democrat James Tallarico in November for U.S. Senate. You have a poll out today conducted for Texas Southern University that dives into what the results of this race could mean in the general election. What did you find out?
Well, in November, we found that there's pretty much of a deadlock between James Tallarico and both Ken Paxton as well as John Cornyn, depending on if one or the other is the nominee. Cornyn holds a 1-point advantage over Tallarico if he's the nominee. Paxton and Tallarico are tied. From a statistical perspective, it's deadlocked.
And it is really that close in terms of the runoff itself, based off of polling that you conducted for the University of Houston, right?
Right. So we also found in the UH Hobby School poll a few weeks back, we found that Cornyn trailed Paxton by 3 points, but that's also effectively a statistical dead heat. So we not only have a very close race for U.S. Senate or the GOP nomination in the U.S. Senate right now, but as we look towards the fall, at least at the present time, a very close race then between whoever comes out of the GOP primary victorious, Ken Paxton or John Cornyn. They're facing a tough battle against Democrat James Talarico in November.
And that was polling conducted again a few weeks ago, and really that's almost a lifetime. When you talk about the final days of a major campaign like this.
Right, and so really this election is going to boil down to turnout. We know who there are Cornyn supporters out there, there are Paxton supporters out there. There aren't too many people to persuade to vote one way or the other, but there are people to persuade to actually turn out to vote. And whether Paxton or Cornyn wins will really depend on which of them can mobilize their supporters to turn out during these 5 days of early voting and then next Tuesday on Election Day.
There are some compelling congressional primary runoffs as well, including the Texas 18th District. That's where incumbent Christian Menefee faces a runoff against fellow Democratic Congressman Al Green, who through redistricting now finds himself in the same district as Menefee. What should we know about Menefee and Green in this runoff?
Well, it's a tale of two different members of Congress. Menefee's been in office for just a couple months. Green's been in office for more than 2 decades. Two different leadership styles. One's sort of a new generation, one's the old guard. It's going to really boil down there as well to, do voters want to see a younger fighter, fresher face in terms of Menefee, or are they going to prefer sort of the person they are familiar with, Al Green?
Will you see the results of that runoff as any way emblematic of the direction of the Democratic Party and Democratic politics in the Houston area?
No, there's some elections where there's sort of a progressive candidate and a more centrist candidate. That's not really the case here. I think this is more of a choice for voters about who they want to be the representative of Congressional District 18. Because one thing in the Hobby School poll found is that voters in Congressional District 18 really like Al Green and they really like Christian Menefee. That is, their preference would be to send both of them back to Congress, but because of the redistricting, they can only send back one.
In the newly drawn 9th District, which covers East Harris County and Liberty County, there's a GOP runoff between Congressman Briscoe Cain and challenger Alex Mueller. What should we know about them?
Well, there you have Alex Mueller, who came very close to defeating Lena Hidalgo in the position for county judge 4 years ago, and Briscoe Cain, who's a state representative.
I made a mistake there. I said congressman. You're right. He's state representative.
Yeah, so he's from sort of the Baytown, Pasadena area. That's a very close race. In March, only a little over 30,000 people voted in that primary. This spring, it's probably going to be closer to 20 or 25,000, meaning that it's going to be a race where whoever turns out to vote will be able to determine the victor. The Hobby School poll had Mueller with a lead, not insurmountable, though, for Cain.
Will you see the results of that runoff as in any way emblematic of the direction of Republican politics in Houston?
Not really there either, because Mueller has been endorsed by President Trump. Briscoe Cain's been endorsed by Governor Abbott. They both have their supporters in the Republican community, so I don't see that really representing much of a split. It's more an issue of personalities and who voters in Congressional District 9 want to see as the GOP nominee.
There are also primary runoffs in the race for Harris County Judge. What can you tell us about those candidates?
Well, there you have on the Democratic side, Niece Parker, who is a former mayor of Houston, controller, city council member, running a strong campaign. She's being challenged by Letitia Plummer, who's a former city council member. Parker is, I think, a strong favorite there. A lot of Democrats know her. A lot of Democrats like her. They like what she did as mayor and then what she's been doing since that time, working for the Victory Fund, which supports LGBTQ candidates throughout the country. We also, on the Republican side, though, have a competitive primary between Orlando Sanchez, who's been a longtime fixture in the Republican community here in Harris County, and then Warren Howell, who's a newcomer to run. He's run once before, I think, but he's challenging Sanchez. I think Sanchez has to be seen as the favorite there. But once again, both of these races are going to be determined by turnout. The lower turnout gets, the more uncertain things can become. And if one candidate can get their people to turn out at a much higher rate than the other, then everyone has a chance of victory.
Mark Jones is a political science fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Mark, thank you very much.
Thanks, Craig.
Up next, want to know what Houston does and doesn't value? Author Michael Pollack says just take a good hard look at our sidewalks. Find out what he means as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
Support for Houston. You count on Houston Public Media. That's why you're here right now. Take the next step and become a new member today. Every gift makes a difference. And with a gift of $5 a month or more, you'll receive PBS Passport, a member benefit that lets you stream more of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
Comes from listeners like you and from Central Market Wine Department, featuring hundreds of sparkling wines, rosé wines, and non-alcoholic spirits and spritzers for spring entertaining. More at centralmarket.com.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV8 at 7, Antiques Roadshow, a new Junk in the Trunk special with bonus finds from their 30th season. Then at 8, more Roadshow from Nashville, Tennessee. Tonight on TV8.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. Depending on where you live in Greater Houston, you may or may not have a sidewalk outside your home. And if you do, it may or may not be in great shape, and it may or may not be your responsibility to pay to maintain it. Houstonians talk a good game, but let's face it, for all the efforts towards more walkability around the region, and there have been plenty, we're still awfully car-centric, and our sidewalks and policies surrounding them reflect that. In his new book, Sidewalk Nation, The Life and Law of America's Most Overlooked Resource, author Michael Pollack argues sidewalks are the contested terrain where America works out its most urgent questions about free speech, homelessness, disability rights, and who our cities are actually built for. Michael Pollack, welcome to Houston Matters. Good morning.
Thank you, Craig.
You are a lawyer, and you also see a legal argument here hiding in plain sight in the quality, condition, and policies surrounding sidewalks. What's that argument?
It's actually a bunch of them. So first of all, one of the things that I think Houston is so interesting when it comes to their land use planning, right? As you know, as listeners know, Houston famously does not have rigid zoning rules. And so that enables the city to have much more diverse mixed use kinds of development in ways that cities elsewhere in the country often are prohibited from doing by their zoning laws. And so there's right there a way in which Houston is particularly well situated to have more multi-use, dense, walkable neighborhoods. And yet, as you were saying in your introduction, that tends not to happen so often. And even when there are sidewalks in place for folks to use if they wanted to, they tend not to use them so much. And so I think one of the things that if Houston wants to achieve greater walkability, and as you said, there is plenty of demand for that, it's not enough to simply have sidewalks and have them in good condition, though that's certainly necessary. We also need to think about how do we actively build more dense multi-use neighborhoods, shopping, and stuff like that, so that folks will want to walk around and will have a broader environment that'll make that appealing and attractive for them.
You visited Houston in the process of developing this book, among a number of other cities. What did you conclude based on visiting Houston and researching infrastructure spending priorities here about what we do seem to value or not value?
Yeah, so Houston, again, as I'm sure your listeners know, operates under this fiscal cap where the city is limited in how much revenue it can bring in through property taxes. The consequence is that a lot of necessary infrastructure work and sidewalk work has to end up being done by others, whether it's private property owners, developers, management district, TERSs, other institutions like those. And many of them are stepping up and doing an admirably good job at making these changes and making these investments, but it is not happening at a citywide sort of wide-angle lens kind of perspective. Rather, it's happening at these individualized or community-based levels. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. In fact, different communities might have different preferences about walkability or about priorities for investment, and that's great. But at the same time, sidewalks work best, walkability works best as part of a broader network. And so when that network is hyper-localized, obviously there's going to be a boundary at which point it stops being quite so effective. You mentioned earlier the role of property owners and developers. Right now in Houston, developers are often required to install new sidewalk where there isn't any whenever they redevelop a particular parcel of land. And in the long run, that could lead to a lot more both in quantity and a lot more high quality sidewalk. But in the meantime, you end up with broken up islands of sidewalk that don't connect to anything. And that's not especially useful, right? As I said, it's only useful as part of a larger network. And so I think another thing to rethink is this responsibility imposed on developers that makes development more expensive and arguably does not really advance the goals of walkability without broader efforts.
That concern about so-called sidewalks to nowhere is one of the reasons last year that Mayor John Whitmire basically waived that requirement for developers in certain circumstances, because basically they'd be building sidewalks where there's nothing to connect them to. Do you see that as just, is that wise, or is the issue really that this is a structural situation that doesn't allow Houston to ever get to a point where those sidewalks will really all connect up?
Yeah, absolutely the latter. So I think removing that responsibility from developers is a good thing, but it needs to be replaced with municipal responsibility rather than no responsibility or no activity, right? Then we would have a situation where if the city stepped up and devoted more resources to sidewalks and to walkability, devoted more political attention to it, we could end up seeing Houston building that walkable network and making those strides toward what indeed there is plenty of demand for. One way to know for sure how much demand there is for walkability is to look at property values. Property values near the system of trails, the Nicholson Trail, the MKT Trail, the Columbia Tap Trail. Property values are higher in those locations because of the access to walkability that they offer. So there is a lot of demand, and I saw it during my visits and my observations and in my interviews as well. There's a lot of demand and interest for more walkability. Houston lacks the broader vision to execute that, and I think that does need to come from the government.
Is that maybe, though, a chicken and egg problem? Are the property values higher because there's more walkability, or is there more walkability because the property values were higher, which meant more revenue to support projects that improve walkability?
Well, and that's, again, part of the problem of a system of private responsibility and private finance is that we can't always tell, right? Moreover, it ends up being that the wealthier communities have more access to walkability than the poorer communities do. And this is especially problematic when it is, or at least tends to be, poorer communities that are more reliant on sidewalks to get from home to work, from home to school, to errands, to friends' homes, to recreation and culture. The more one is reliant on sidewalks, the more important it is that they be in good condition, that they be a complete network. But wherever we see systems of private responsibility and private finance, we see this gap in quality between wealthier and poorer communities. And that only adds insult to injury when it's those very communities that are more reliant on that resource.
Where are some cities that, at least in your view, they're getting this right?
So the city of Denver, just a couple of years ago, voters passed a referendum to shift responsibility for sidewalk construction and maintenance from property owners to the city. And they fund this with a fairly nominal fee on property owners. that money, rather than going into general revenue, is devoted to specifically sidewalk construction and maintenance. Now, this is just in its beginning stages, but other cities, mostly smaller cities that have taken this step, have seen real opportunities to more equitably and efficiently expand the network. And I think Denver is a great example of a big city making the right steps in that direction. I want to underscore, too, what I just said about not just equitable, but efficient, right? Even if we put to the side, and I don't think we ought to, but even if we put to the side the concerns about socioeconomic equity, it's just more economically efficient for the economies of scale that would come from one entity doing the development and the construction, rather than separated out across a bunch of individuals who may or may not have the resources or the attention to get it done effectively or in a timely fashion. So both in terms of equity and just in terms of getting it done, these systems of government responsibility can be much more effective.
You argue that this is all about more than just walkability, that constitutional rights, legal rights are restricted when you don't have well-built and maintained sidewalks. How so?
That's absolutely right. So sidewalks are not only places for us to get from point A to point B, to get from home to work or home to school. Sidewalks are also places where communities take shape, where local economies can thrive, where we exercise our rights to speak or protest or make public art. They're spaces where we end up having confrontations sometimes with police or other government surveillance. And so, yes, they implicate our rights under the First Amendment, under the Fourth Amendment. They implicate our rights under the Second Amendment when it comes to the carrying of firearms in public spaces. And so sidewalks are not just about access and mobility. Sidewalks are really the space in our communities that is most heavily used, or at least could be most heavily used, by such a wide range of people and uses, right? Whereas streets are for cars and transportation only, and parks are for recreation only, sidewalks are where we see this collision of private use, economic use, government use, transportation use. And that's why they need much more attention, and that's why cities can really thrive if they devote more resources to them. But it's not just about devoting those resources, it's also about thinking through, as a society, what kind of sidewalk life, what kind of civic life do we want to have, and how can we construct and regulate sidewalks to achieve that kind of civic life.
Michael Pollack is the author of Sidewalk Nation, The Life and Law of America's Most Overlooked Resource. Thanks for talking with us.
Thank you very much.
Just ahead, why Texas now leads the nation in heartworm. That's not good. We discuss that and welcome your pet care questions for veterinarian Dr. Lori Teller at talk@houstonmatters.org or 713-440-8870 as Houston Matters continues on News 88.7 and YouTube.
This programming is made possible by...
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross-country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
Featuring a selection of tequilas, from sipping varieties to cocktail-ready bottles. Available seasonally at Specs. Details at specsonline.com. Cheers to savings.
Join us for Hello Houston, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., taking a deep dive into the stories that matter to Houstonians, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained, with the generous support from our founding sponsor, John Bradshaw.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen.
How much is that dog in the window?
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Once again, Houston Matters goes to the dogs and cats as we welcome your questions about the care and feeding of your canine and feline companions for veterinarian Dr. Lori Teller from Meyerland Animal Clinic and the Texas Veterinary Medical Association. Dr. Teller, welcome.
Glad to be here.
And we welcome any questions you have about the dog or cat in your life. Call or text us at 713-440-8870. Email talk@houstonmatters.org. Post your question on our live video stream on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. I do want to start with this. According to a nationwide survey out last month from the American Heartworm Society, Texas, for the first time, has the highest incidence of heartworm in dogs in the entire United States. First, remind us, what is heartworm?
Heartworms are a parasite that are carried by mosquitoes. So a mosquito bites your dog or your cat and passes on the immature form of the heartworms, which then migrate to your heart and lungs
and grow.
And grow. It looks like a big mass of spaghetti. Ugh. It's awful. And that leads to respiratory disease, heart failure, and ultimately death.
While this is a dubious statistical top spot for Texas,
it's
also not really a new phenomenon. I looked at the American Heartworm Society's incidence maps, which come out every few years. Southeast Texas, in particular, has had the highest rates of heartworm in pets going back more than 20 years now.
Yeah.
You'd have to go back to 2004 to find a time when the rates were merely high. It's getting worse also every few years.
It is getting worse.
Why?
And the Gulf Coast has always been the hotbed of heartworm disease. But as the weather gets warmer, mosquitoes are more prevalent. And it's warmer in more northern areas, which is why now it's not just Southeast Texas, but all of Texas is encompassed in this. Harder and harder to battle the mosquitoes, it seems, and so the disease spreads. And of course, we had issues during Hurricane Katrina and subsequent hurricanes when animals who were from the Southeast and the Gulf Coast were then sent to northern areas where heartworms were less of a problem and allowed that to become a problem in those areas as well.
So this is as much about climate as anything else.
Climate's certainly involved in it. Parasites are spreading, ticks are spreading, Lyme disease is getting closer and closer to Texas with every passing year. And so we have to be able to manage the whole picture. And as a veterinarian, I'm focused on the parasites.
So the good news in all of this is that heartworm is relatively easy to prevent.
Heartworm is so easy to prevent. There are more options for heartworm prevention now than there ever have been. There are monthly topicals, there are monthly orals. There's actually an injection that can be given that will last either 6 months or 12 months, depending on which option you choose, so you don't have to remember it. If your animal won't take pills, doesn't cooperate for the topical, the injection is the way to go. My animals like the heartworm prevention, so they're very happy to get it on a monthly basis.
Snack.
They think it's a great treat.
You're not going to tell them otherwise.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
And here you go. And so easy with so many different choices to give that it's worth doing.
Is the medication expensive?
It varies. So some of them are relatively inexpensive. Some of them that also include flea prevention and tick prevention and ear mite and mange prevention are going to cost more because they're covering more problems in that single dose.
How expensive, though, can it be to treat heartworm once your dog or cat ends up with it?
Yes, and it's certainly more expensive to treat. It can go into the thousands of dollars to treat, and you're also dealing with the potential for permanent lung and heart damage from the heartworm parasite living there, and residual damage can stay even after you've treated your pet.
This is Houston Matters. I'm Craig Cohen. On the third Monday of each month, we welcome your dog and cat care questions for veterinarian Dr. Lori Teller. There is still time to call 713-440-8870. You can email us at talk@houstonmatters.org, or you can comment on our video stream at houstonpublicmedia.org and on Houston Public Media's YouTube channel. And that's where we have a question for you about flea and tick prevention. Do you recommend, are there pros and cons to chewables versus topicals for a dog? Is one better than the other?
One is not necessarily better than the other overall, the one may be better for your particular dog. So if you have a dog that is frequently getting bathed or groomed, loves to swim, spends time rolling in mud puddles, then definitely the oral version, or there is now also a long-lasting injectable version for flea and tick prevention, would be a better route to go. If your dog just refuses to take the oral version and is not a swimmer or getting bathed frequently, then a topical version is certainly the better option for you, because it will be what stays and works for the dog.
All right. We have an email from Kimberly who says, I've been finding large wet spots on furniture where my 8-year-old standard poodle has slept. I'm concerned she may have a urinary tract infection, but the wet spots are my only clue. She has not been on any kind of distress other than seasonal allergies. I've been giving her 2 Benadryl pills on days when it's especially bad. Are there any home remedies I can try for a urinary tract infection? Is it possible the Benadryl knocked her out so she peed in her sleep? I don't have room in my budget right now for vet bills. The last trip for dehydration was $700.
Oof, yes. Unfortunately, there is no home remedy for a urinary tract infection. I wish I could tell you differently, but there is not. It is possible that your dog is developing not a UTI, but some incontinence. And if the Benadryl does knock out your dog, it makes your dog super sleepy and misses the subconscious alerts to go outside, then that's certainly a possibility, and you could try cutting back on the Benadryl and see what happens as far as that goes. So certainly do that, but if it is a true urinary tract infection, it is going to take a veterinary visit to find out what's going on. They're going to need to look at a urine sample, see if there's bacteria there, and then determine the next best steps to get that under control. But if it's incontinence, certainly stop the Benadryl, see if it happens. If it's still continuing, then I would definitely recommend trying to see your veterinarian. Incontinence can also be managed with medication as well.
All right, let's take a call. We have Brent on the line from Conroe. Brent, what's your question for Dr. Teller?
Hi. We're about to get a new puppy soon, if I can get on the list, but I was wondering if it's worth it to purchase the insurance for any vet bills, and if so, if there's any place you recommend trying to go through.
Congratulations on the new puppy. Do you know what breed?
Well, we don't have it yet. We're trying to set it up so that we can get my kids want a chocolate lab.
Okay.
So we'll see.
Great.
We had a yellow.
Labs are the best. I have labs. Love them. So definitely first make sure you're going through a reputable breeder who's screening for all the genetic diseases that labs are prone to, and same for anyone else looking for a new puppy from a breeder. Just make sure you're using a reputable one. Pet insurance can definitely be a great option for families to consider. And there is a variety of choices out there. I would recommend researching the policies to see what would work for you. There's a website called Policy Advisor, and that's spelled P-A-W. Policy, and they list a whole bunch of different pet insurance options and decide which one seems to be the most suitable for y'all. I do generally recommend avoiding coverage for wellness care, such as the vaccines and prevention. If that works for you, I think you tend to end up paying more in premiums than you do in the cost of the wellness care. But again, that's going to be what works best for you and your family. But you certainly want coverage for illness, accidents, those kinds of things. Look at what the deductibles are, what the out-of-pocket is, those kinds of things, and see which one is going to work the best for you. But there's definitely a place for pet health insurance for a lot of pet owners, and it can give you some peace of mind.
All right. Thanks very much for that call. We'll go next to Susan in Missouri City. Susan, what's your question for Dr. Teller?
What are your thoughts on the vaccine now, or the shot for flea and tick?
I actually used it in one of my dogs, and it seems to be working really well. He got it about 6 weeks ago, and so far so good. No side effects. He took the shot like a champ. Didn't seem painful when he got it. And so I think for a certain population of dogs, it's a great choice. It will prevent fleas and most ticks for up to 12 months. And for people whose pets either don't like to take the oral or the topical version, or people who just can't remember to do it on a monthly basis, and I totally get that, then the injection is certainly a great option.
All right, thanks very much for that call. Robert's in Houston Heights and writes, our cat is 12 years old and generally healthy. He's very selective in what he eats, but seems to want to eat. There can be 3 types of food, both wet and dry, in the area where he eats, and he'll walk away, and then a few minutes later he'll wail and move us back to the food, signaling he wants to eat something. On some occasions, he will eat in front of us. Is this a common trait? Any suggestions on getting him to eat more consistently?
Cats are cats. Some cats eat in the nighttime when everybody's asleep. Some cats don't care. A lot of cats are grazers. They eat off and on all day. So I'm not particularly concerned if he's not a meal eater, unless this is a change in his behavior. If he's always eaten at mealtime and now he's not doing that, that would be the bigger concern for me. And it may not be the food. It's possible that he has a tooth abscess or some kind of oral or dental pain that could be making him only feel comfortable eating a few bites at a time. Other problems that can start impacting our more senior cats that can throw their appetites off would be kidney disease would be a big one. So making sure he gets checked for that. Some kind of gastrointestinal disease can also do that. They can have some low-grade nausea, and they'll eat a little bit, and then they'll start to feel nauseated. So certainly a complete physical exam and probably some blood work would help you rule out some of these problems. And if he needs to have some dental care taken or done, then that can also help alleviate some oral pain and see if he eats better once that has happened as well.
Is your approach to finicky eating different when it's a dog versus a cat?
Not necessarily, especially in that age group. Dental pain, oral pain is a problem. There's probably a variety of more common things that can do that in a dog because they tend to get into things that they don't need to get into things, the way cats do, and certainly cats get into things, but dogs don't tend to be as discriminating. But in a 12-year-old dog, I'd still be concerned about oral pain or some kind of metabolic problem.
How about this question of leaving the food out for the dog or cat to eat at whatever hours they want versus setting precise times and precise amounts of food?
I'm a big believer in meals for dogs. My dogs get meals, and if you snooze, you lose, and you don't get anything until your next meal. And this is personal. My cat gets canned food twice a day, and then there's a little bit of kibble left out for him to graze on, mostly because I don't need him awakening me at 4 a.m. to tell me how hungry he is.
I should point out, while you've already hit the ground running, as of June 1st, you formally become the new executive director and CEO of the Texas Veterinary Medical Association. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
What does the TVMA do?
The TVMA is a professional trade organization that advocates on behalf of veterinarians, pet owners, animal owners, so farm animals, livestock, all of that, to improve both human and public health and animal health and welfare.
And what will you be doing in this new role?
I will be running the whole shebang. The buck will stop with me.
Okay.
But I am fortunate that there is already a terrific staff in place and a wonderful group of volunteer leadership. So I'm very excited.
All right. Dr. Lori Teller is a veterinarian with the Meyerland Animal Clinic. And again, as of June 1st, she's the new executive director and CEO of the Texas Veterinary Medical Association. Dr. Teller, as always, thank you very much.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day.
You too. Still to come. Oh, great. Jose Altuve's hurt now. And are the Texans playing yet? We discuss as Houston Matters continues.
I love my dog. He's my dog. If you don't love my dog, that's okay. I don't want you to. He's my dog. I love my dog.
I'm Stephen Dubner. On the next Freakonomics Radio, how does a composer feel after the world premiere?
Last week, I was a superstar. This week, I'm nothing.
David Lang and the Wealth of Nations. That's next time on Freakonomics Radio.
Freakonomics, that's tonight at 10 here on your NPR station, News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from electricityplans.com, helping Houstonians find electricity plans based on home energy usage and rate comparisons. Enrollment details and more at electricityplans.com.
Support comes from West Chase District, serving businesses with office options, regional connectivity, amenity investments, and talent pool access within a managed business and residential hub in Houston. More on how West Chase works at westchasedistrict.com.
The Astros took 2 of 3 from the Rangers over the weekend, but lost Jose Altuve in the process in what is increasingly looking like a lost season. But that's okay. The Texans season starts in just 4 months. All right, let's talk about it. We'll start with the Astros, and we welcome in Bleav in Astros podcast co-host Jeff Balke. Hi, Jeff.
Good morning, Craig.
All right, Altuve has a grade 2 left oblique strain. According to Astros manager Joe Espada, this means that Altuve is indeed headed to the injured list. Do we know how long he'll be out?
Well, Jake Myers is about to come back, and he had exactly the same injury, and that lasted about 6 weeks. So I assume we're looking at a roughly the same timetable. Obviously, Jose Altuve is a little bit older, so that could factor into it. But I would imagine we're looking at 6 to 8 weeks, something along those lines. So not a short period of time.
How did he sustain the injury?
Just swinging at a pitch. Oblique injuries happen in baseball. They are a pretty common injury. It's sort of like high ankle sprains in football and certain things. They're just it's a part of your body that gets twisted. And when, and these guys work out and they do everything they can, but it's just like if you and I sneezed one day and threw our back out. Think about this as a very similar type of situation, except with highly trained athletes.
All right. The Astros, I should point out, have 14 players on the injured list as of this moment. That number is expected to improve. You mentioned center fielder Jake Myers.
Yep.
Also, as soon as today, shortstop Jeremy Pena may come off the injured list. Reliever Nate Pearson as well. Looks like he's ready to return. So I guess that's good news, right?
Yeah, there's a few guys that are coming off. The Pena should be today. Pearson probably today as well, which is interesting. The first time we've seen him this year. Hard-throwing right-hander. Tops out at about 101. Jake Myers should be back sometime this week, and we're looking at Josh Hader has only about 4 or 5 more rehab starts, so probably another 10 days before he'll be eligible to come off the injured list and get back. So, it's certainly helpful, and the Astros are going through kind of a weird period where they're sort of reshuffling. We're seeing like a regression to the mean with their hitting and sort of a progression to the mean with their pitching, and so anything they can do to get a little bit healthier is a good thing.
And I guess maybe it softens the blow of being without Altuve for a month and a half potentially.
Yeah, and they have options there. Braden Shoemake has played really well and can shift over to second base. Bryce Matthews, who's been playing center field really, really well, has actually came up as a second baseman, and so you'll see him get some time there as well. Listen, their lineup has been kind of a patchwork thing, and I think they haven't had a deep lineup all season long. This doesn't help that, but defensively I think they'll be okay.
They are now 19-29. That sounds awful.
It is awful.
Well, but thanks to playing in the terrible American League West,
bad.
They are only 5 games out of first place.
Yep.
So the record and the injured list and the trajectory of recent seasons suggest this could just continue to be an awful year. But maybe they can reverse this. Maybe.
I think they definitely are. Let's just say this: the Astros are going to believe that they can reverse it probably until the end of the season. I don't think there's going to be a time. I don't imagine this is an Astros team that suddenly just becomes a team that only wins 50 games, right? I think this is a team that still is going to get 70, 80, wins in that range, just simply because, again, the AL West is horrible, and they're going to remain, I think, within striking distance of the Mariners and other teams. Whether they can get there is dependent, I think, wholly dependent on can they actually straighten out their pitching wholesale. The bullpen seems to have kind of gotten it back together. They've gotten good quality starts now from some of their pitchers, particularly Spencer Arrighetti, who's been outstanding. You just got to kind of wonder, how long can they sort of limp along with these various issues before they finally have to make the decision that they're going to be out of it.
The Astros woes have us already looking forward to football in September. Late last week, the NFL released its 2026 schedule, which features 4 Texans games in prime time, another at London's Wembley Stadium. Jonathan Alexander covers the NFL and the Texans for the Houston Chronicle. Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
At first blush, would you characterize the Texans' schedule as favorable or challenging, or a little bit of both?
You know what? When I first looked at it, I thought it was maybe a little bit challenging, but the more I kind of dive into it, it is kind of favorable. So maybe it's a little bit of both, to be honest with you. They finished second in the AFC South, so they got a second place schedule. So some of the teams that they got, like the Chargers, for instance, are not as good, or were not as good as the Broncos last year, who they could have played if they finished first place. So, I thought it was a pretty favorable schedule, especially how spread out some of their games are.
Last season, I want to give credit where it's due. You predicted that the Texans would go 12-5. Once you got a look at their schedule for last year, you were right. And now going into this year, you're predicting they'll finish 12-5.
Yeah, I do. Sometimes I like to, give some of the NFL teams the benefit of the doubt. I think the Texans are going to actually win the AFC South this year if they can remain healthy at the right spots. The Jaguars have an extremely tough schedule, and I think the Jaguars are going to be good, but when you play a first-place schedule like they're playing, nearly every game is difficult. They're going to run into some roadblocks just like the Texans did last year. And I think the Texans having that experience last year of having won so many games with a first-place schedule, I think that'll give them confidence heading into next year that if they remain healthy at the right spots, and they were extremely healthy last year, if they remain healthy at the right spots, they can win a lot of games. And I predicted 12, but I also think they could get up to 13.
Which games are you most looking forward to next season?
There are a couple. The game against the Philadelphia Eagles, not personally because it's on Christmas Eve, but from a viewing standpoint, that is going to be a good game. That's going to be an ultimate test for the Texans because you're going into a hostile environment. Philadelphia is one of the wildest crowds, and then Philadelphia is typically a team that's been consistent, has been to the Super Bowl 2 of the last 4 years. That game, I think the Packers game is also going to be interesting late in the year. You're going to Green Bay in December or January. And so, it might be snowing.
The Texans have not historically fared very well in cold weather climates.
In cold weather, they've done well, but when there's been precipitation involved, that's when they've had their struggles. Look back at the Patriots game last year.
What are the chances that's going to happen in December in Wisconsin?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Any trap games on the schedule? Any that you look at and you say, well, on the surface, this looks like one they probably ought to win, but...
Yeah, I think the Titans early on, they played the Titans early in their schedule, and I think the Titans are going to be a lot better than they were last year. You got Cam Ward, who's entering year 2 with a brand-new coaching staff, Robert Saleh, who has had success against D'Amico Ryans. Robert Saleh was D'Amico Ryans' mentor, very close friends. They run a very similar defense, and Robert Saleh has taken 2 out of 3 games against him. So I think that is a potential trap game because they've improved in all areas of their team and with a good coaching staff.
Every time you look at a schedule, you're looking for things that are out of the ordinary, and maybe the most out of the ordinary is that they're headed to London for a game. What kind of impact does that have on a football team, traveling that distance and being kind of out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, the teams that typically travel the most are the teams that typically struggle. And the Texans will be traveling however many miles that is across the country, probably 3 days in advance. So that's going to take a toll on their body, especially coming off a tough game the week before. While the Jaguars have the benefit of having played the Eagles in London the week prior, so they'll most likely, it wouldn't make any sense to travel back, they'll most likely stay in London and then play that game against the Texans. So you got to think you're probably going to have some tired players, coming into that game.
Any teams you're surprised or disappointed the Texans are not playing next season?
No, not surprised because their schedule is usually made up, based on, in advance who you're going to play the opponents, with the exception of 4. I believe it's 4. depending on how you finish in that schedule. So everything was pretty expected, and I think this was ideal for the Texans finishing second in the AFC South because they play a little bit of a lower tier than the first place guys.
Jonathan, do you think the Astros' tough start and probable decline, has us even more excited about the Texans and looking ahead, maybe with a little more energy, just because it's going to be a long summer?
I do. I mean, I think even if you've looked at it like probably the past 2 years or so, Astros has been king of this town ever since they've been winning, and the Texans were losers for, probably like 3 years straight. And I think that hurt the excitement around the team, and now they've been winning 3 years straight in the playoffs, AFC divisional round. They have the potential to go even farther, a new team with some upgraded pieces. You can see the excitement around this team, and I think that in terms of excitement around the fan base, I think the Texans really have a chance to make a push here.
Jeff, just how long a summer could we really be in for as sports fans?
Look, we've been spoiled here with a decade plus of just greatness from the Astros. So I think if you're an Astros fan, part of what you need to be preparing yourself for is the inevitable downturn of a franchise. They're not going to keep this going forever, no matter how much Jim Crane likes to say that the window's always open as long as he's the owner. That's not really true. And quite frankly, if I'm Astros fans right now and baseball fans in general, I'm enjoying as much of it as I can because it's very likely we're going to have a long labor shutout starting at the end of this season based on the new collective bargaining agreement. So I would say just enjoy it while you can.
Jeff Balke co-hosts the Bleav in Astros podcast. Jonathan Alexander covers the NFL and the Texans for the Houston Chronicle. Thank you both very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, sir.
And that'll do it for today's show. The Houston Matters team includes Michael Haggerty, Joshua Zinn, Brenda Valdivia, Mincho Jacob, and Laura Walker. Jared Carroll's our technical director. On tomorrow's show, recently a Houston businessman was acquitted and released by a federal judge in a Foreign Corruption Practices Act case. Jury convictions in such cases are hardly ever overturned. We'll find out why this was in this case. Also, turtles, geckos, and snakes were among the creatures on display in Pasadena at this month's Repticon. Our Brenda Valdivia was there, and we'll share what she heard from breeders and vendors at the Exotic Animal Expo. I'm Craig Cohen. Join us tomorrow for those and other Houston Matters.